Welcome to Healthy Relationships for Youth, Session 7, Gender Talk. Gender can be a tricky subject for anyone to approach. We are taught at a young age that girls and boys should act, think, and feel a certain way, which creates gender norms and stereotypes. These norms are such that when we think girl, certain appearances, behaviors, and preferences come to mind, and when we think boy, certain appearances, behaviors, and preferences come to mind. We also tend to wrap these norms up into two separate boxes of either girl or boy. This is referred to as the gender binary. The word binary just means two. However, this binary doesn't capture the full extent of gender. There tends to be two main scripts when we think about gender that work in a linear way. The problem with thinking about gender in these two linear scripts is that although some people may conform to gender norms some of the time, gender norms do not capture everyone's experiences all of the time. The gender binary leaves out people who don't follow traditional gender norms or fall into the category of girl or boy. Think about it. Who is left out of these scripts? What about girls who aren't very feminine? What about boys who like other boys? What happens if someone is born with a penis but identifies as a girl? What about people who are intersex? Thinking about gender this way pushes people into roles that may not suit their actual selves and might not be true to their experience at all. How does all of this connect to violence? Well, violence based on gender happens more often than we might think. Gender-based violence is influenced by a person's reference group, these groups being gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, religion, class, and other categories, as well as power dynamics and systems that maintain binary norms and other power imbalances. This view of the world creates a power imbalance between people of different genders, which is reinforced by societal gender norms. In Canada, gender-based violence can be seen in the higher rates of sexualized violence against women and trans folks, high rates of missing and murdered Indigenous women, and rates of domestic violence against women. These gender dynamics contribute to unhealthy relationship patterns within dating relationships, friendships, family relationships, and even our relationships with acquaintances and strangers. That's why bullying among people of all genders can often be linked to whether someone's performance as a boy or a girl is good enough. For example, if a boy is perceived as feminine, he is called a sissy. Gender roles, stereotypes, myths, and the binary are also connected to violence in the forms of homophobia and transphobia. Gender is fluid and can change over time for some people. A person who is assigned girl at birth can grow up to be a girl, a boy, non-binary, or a person who does not label their gender. People who undergo gender transformations are routinely the victims of violent attacks, often ending in murder. People who identify as gay may be seen as gender traitors and are often bullied, attacked, and excluded because they don't follow the outdated rules of how to be a man and how to be a lady. So, with all of that in mind, please take a moment to reflect on how your gender influences the way you live. Make sure to allow students to ask questions and to allow them to explore these topics without judgment. This may be the first time some of these students are being asked to think about what gender means. When you're thinking about challenging ideas of gender and what is considered normal, it might be helpful to think back to the binary scripts from the beginning of this video. While that might be the way we are taught to think about gender, with everything we've talked about in mind, gender scripts get a lot more complicated. If we tried to make a more accurate version of a gender script, we still wouldn't be able to get it right. This is what an attempt at a gender script might look like, even though things are still missing from this example. Through this example, there is more variance in how people can identify and how people might present themselves or who they might be romantically interested in. Even though a lot more is included in this example, this is still not a complete representation of everyone's experiences. This is why it is so important to note that not all students will identify as either male or female. Many may identify outside of these genders, be transitioning, or simply unsure. it is important to allow students to self-identify and avoid gendering them through language or action. For example, saying, "Why don't you go sit with the other boys?" or "Girls over here, boys over there." Groups don't have to be strictly boys and girls. It would be a good idea to chat with your HRY support teacher beforehand about the needs of the students in your class. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great session.